Conrad, you ever going to retire?
Well, I did retire involuntarily for a while. So
That's
see, I'm
true, you did.
other than as a writer.
I don't give a toss. I don't give a damn what anybody says about me.
Now, I can't believe I'm going to say this. I don't want to be too over the top.
I think you dress more for yourself as you get older. And I think because by that time you know who you are.
And the fact that I descended from Dracula. But I don't. My husband is a direct descendant of Dracula. I descend from Dracula's half-brother, Drac the Monk.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, The Zoomer with Conrad Black and Denise Donlan.
Greetings, everyone. Today on the show, hired, fired, and not retired. We're talking about jobs around the round table. And Conrad, this job found you sitting down with royalty.
Yes, it did, Denise. I have a conversation with the always entertaining Princess Michael of Kent. She talks about the royals, very discreetly but interestingly, design, her most recent book, and work.
And work. Well, she probably doesn't need the work, right?
Being
a royal?
Actually, they have a rather limited allowance, and she works hard.
Oh, good. Well, good for her. Always nice to hear. Because today we're talking about how the world of work is really radically changing, where royals can work, actually, and how Zoomers are responding. And we've gathered some very wise folks around the table, so let's tee up the topic. Freedom 55? More like Freedom 85. Welcome to the ranks of the unemployed, unretired, and reinvented. In 2012, 63% of Canadians expected to work past the age of 66. Only 37% said they wanted to. The rest say they have to. But with our average life expectancy in the 80s, the whole concept of retirement has been upended. Think about the math for a second. From 65 to 85, that's 20 years, or 53,340 rounds of golf. Downsizing, outsourcing, and offshoring. These days, it's easy to find yourself out of a job. So what's up? Zoomers have the know-how, the work ethic, and the track record. They also have the youngins trying to eat their lunch. So how do you get fireproofed when your boss is younger than your career? How do you transition from a steady check to starting your own business? And how do you find a job when everyone says, my goodness, you do have a lot of experience, don't you? So we know that people are working longer than ever, some because they want to and some because they have to. And some of them just don't ever want to quit. So Conrad, you ever going to retire?
Well, I did retire involuntarily for a while. So
that's
see,
true,
I'm
you
come
did.
Back, other than as a writer, you say, but I'm making a comeback now. So I'm one jump ahead of this. You say I'm right on the cutting edge of going forward here.
Well, we know there is a lot of change in the workplace. And Lisa, I'll throw it on to you. You co-founded a company called The Challenge Factory, which helps Zoomers get into the workplace or even keep their jobs. What's it like out there? How different is it?
It's really different. I think lots of people are finding themselves in circumstances they hadn't necessarily anticipated. And for some, the biggest surprise is that they want to keep working. As they get into their 50s and 60s and even beyond, that idea that they were going to stop working and do something, golf or something else, all of a sudden doesn't seem so fulfilling when there is 20 years ahead of you. Right. And so one of the surprises is, what is it that I'm going to do? And how can I find meaningful work or a way to make meaningful contribution that meets my lifestyle needs and all the rest of the needs that I have now, when that hadn't been contemplated before? Right.
Well, there is a stat that I read recently that said a third of Canadians who had retired already are back in the workplace. Is that because they want to or have to?
The majority of those surveyed said they had underestimated the amount of money they were going to need. They weren't all coming back full-time, and they weren't all necessarily replacing their peak salary from their heyday. But here I am, I've got a pension, I've got my savings, I'm out of the workforce, oops, I need more. So they're coming back in, and yeah, that number is expected to grow. Yeah.
Well, it also levels another complaint that we hear a lot of, especially here in Canada, that as the Zoomers are working longer, they're stealing all the jobs from the graduates. Is that true, Marty? What do you think?
Well, I wouldn't say they're stealing all the jobs. Studies have said that for every boomer that retires, it will take 2 to do their job, just because of the way we've worked and how hard we've worked. So it kind of begs the question, why are these kids not getting hired? But yes, people are staying in the workforce longer. So I think it causes an issue where you will have people over 50 in these senior jobs, and the 30-somethings and younger, they're clamoring for those jobs. And so what happens? The older people get sent out the door to make room and allow those younger ones to take those jobs and move up.
And there's an economic principle called the lump of labor fallacy, which basically says one population staying in the economy doesn't necessarily threaten the employment of another population. For people to understand that, it was true with immigrant workers earlier in the last century. It was true with women entering the workforce. And today it's true with older workers. Older workers staying in the workforce is not the cause of youth unemployment. There's two dynamics that are happening at the same time. And if we don't understand both of them for what they are, we're going to pick solutions that don't help anybody.
But isn't it just a question of economics? I mean, Conrad, I know that, you've run big companies. I've run a big company, particularly when I was at Sony Music. When I walked in, it was right at the beginning of the downward vortex of downloading, right? And suddenly, there was a shortfall of millions of dollars, and you were suddenly looking at how am I going to, find these efficiencies? And then you have to make a decision around who's going to stay and who's going to go. And some people have big salaries, and you have more people with little salaries. And when you start to add it up, I think that the inclination to find the big whacks of money is at the top end of the management piece.
But that's the easy thing to do, and that's the easy way out. And just cutting people isn't always the solution. It can cost you a lot of money to cut people because of all the things that flow from that. Start looking at your processes and what you're doing within the organization and where else can I save money.
Greg, I'll throw this to you because, Greg, you worked in a very large company for many, many years, top of the heap, and downsized suddenly. Do you think there was an element of ageism in that?
I didn't feel an element of ageism in my particular case, but I can sense outside of that particular isolated scenario, there may be some ageism going on.
I had a friend of mine she's 61 years old, and she lives in a small town. She's trying to find work, and she was talking to the employment insurance person on the phone, expressing her frustration, and the answer back to her was, well, the reason why you're not getting work is because you're too old. And it never crossed her mind, but now that has really upset her, and she's having a lot of self-doubt in terms of findings.
There's a number of us here who have been restructured after many, many years in the workforce. How did it feel? Did you see it coming?
When I look back on it, I think I had an inclination, but I really wasn't stepping up to recognize it. And at first I was sort of numb. It was like, is this really happening? And you go through all the different roller coaster of emotions. And then I just decided that I could either stay there or try and reinvent myself. And
that's what you're doing.
That's what I chose to do. That's what's working for me.
Yeah, the sadness. There might be a little bit of a wee factor.
Yeah.
Here's your package. Off I go. Okay, Greg, how did you see it coming?
Oh, I saw it coming. Yeah, a lot of people saw it coming, and so it's never a pleasant experience. But once you sort of get the necessities done, and I drove home with the biggest smile on my face.
Right.
Because I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And
And now you have a successful new company?
Yeah, it's been great.
Marnie, you're an HR professional, looking for work as an HR professional. Did you see it coming?
Yeah, I did. And in my situation, it was a new CEO, and generally they do like to make a change. And you don't miss the work, but you miss the people. And that was the hardest thing at first, but then you just reconnect. And
Right. And who fires an HR person? Does HR fire the HR?
No, the CEO.
The CEO, okay, great. Well, we're going to talk about branding and a whole lot more when we get back, and we want to be the best employer that we can be, so we're going to give you a full union break and pause for some messages. We'll be back in a sec with a lot more on work.
My name is Miss Keener, and I'm here today to talk about your options.
I worked for this company for 17 years, and they sent a fourth grader to can me. What the is this?
perfectly normal to be upset. However, the sooner you can tell yourself that greater opportunities are waiting for you.
Opportunities? I'm 57 years old.
I need you to go back to your office now and start putting together your personal things.
Lisa, how do we stay fireproof?
So I think there's a few things that individuals can do to help themselves. And the first is to recognize that they need to decide what they want. So if you're hanging in a job because you feel like you don't have any other options, you may want to take a step back and reflect on what it is that you need and what criteria you have in order to be able to transform where you are into something where you actually want to be. I think another thing that's really important for people to continue to do all the time is to keep up their training, their networking, and the professional development that they receive. In general, training and professional development falls off as soon as people start to turn about 48. They don't get prioritized in training plans anymore. They don't ask for training. And so that renewal of not just skills, but also keeping in touch with what's new and current in your environment and in your industry is really, really important if you want to continue to contribute. And I think the last piece is networking and recognizing that you need to be able to tell your story well. You need to be able to continually add new people to your network. So often, I actually sit with very senior executives who have retired and who want to do something back in the workforce. Top of the house executives that you think would be able to get a job like that. And they'll say to me, you know what? I have a lot of really high power, high position colleagues that I could call on, but they're all retired too. So who am I going to talk to that actually is in a position to be able to do the hiring rather than it's one of my friends from the outside trying to get a favor from the next layer of management?
So I think the trick is to analyze, to do an audit. What am I doing now to secure my position if I am on the street, as it were, okay? What companies would I be talking to? How do I start marketing and merchandising? And I don't mean deliberately, you know, inappropriately contacting competitors, but how am I positioned in the industry? Am I visible? What the kids are learning, who are competing with us, frankly, the Zoomers, what they're being told at conferences is that if a company hasn't heard about you before you send in the resume, you're wasting your time. You're better off thinking about your value in the marketplace and merchandising that value. You can get your own website for $9 a year for a URL and start blogging, for heaven's sake, to create a little bit of visibility. And I would recommend that everybody do that.
At least if you're looking for a place to start small, especially in Canada, build a really good LinkedIn profile. Find things that are interesting in your industry or that are interesting to you that are related to your work or another area and share that and build your network that way. It's a really easy tool and it's really pervasive in Canada. It's very important.
Well, I imagine the interesting, while you're doing your self-audit, trying to figure out if you're happy in your job or how, you know, what my transferable skills are, you could come up with the idea where you're like, actually, this is a breath of fresh air, and I can take all this skill set and apply it to a new business. And you started your own business and are loving it.
Absolutely. And if I didn't have the sort of the academic background, the MBA, and all of the experience that I learned working in the corporate world, doing what I do would be very different. I run a gym, but running a gym is really not about, I mean, I do train people, but that's not what it's about. It's about running a business. And so all of those skills were completely valuable and transferred over.
Conrad, what's your brand, you think?
I'm not the right person to ask that. It depends who you speak to. No, look, I had a complicated, startling interruption in my career, and I mean, one can make light of it, and I often do, but it was a real challenge, you know, and I had to reorient myself. I mean, in all the legal problems I had, the one thing that did do well was my writing career. I had more time to write, and that's one thing you can do at any hour of the day. But I will say this, it is a real challenge, and particularly, I mean, all joking aside for a second, I'm almost 70 years old, and it is a real challenge for me to start a new occupation like this and other things. And the room may be full of people who think I'm not making a very good job of it, but I'm doing my best.
You're doing very well. Yeah. There's stigma, right? When you've identified yourself with your title, your career, whatever, and suddenly you don't have it. How do you deal with that emotional just even at parties? What do you do?
So you need a passion outside of your work too. And my dad always said that, because a lot of people who do retire, they don't know what to do with themselves because they so identified themselves with their job. I mean, it's the first thing that you do when you get to a cocktail party is what do you do? Suddenly the work stops and they don't know what to do with themselves. So I think it's important to find passion, and maybe your passion is your job, and if it is, then you're very, very lucky. But I think you need passions outside of that as well.
Tracy, how was it for you?
I chose to define myself with what I did. And it was really interesting. I'm actually working with Challenge Factory to start defining myself who I am. And that's a whole journey for me because I've never taken a step back to really do some deep diving on that. So it's scary, but it's also very exciting.
It's sort of the human marketplace, you know. I mean, it is a human challenge. That's for people like you. You must do, both of you, a terrific amount of just old-fashioned, sensible encouragement of people.
One of the things that you lose when you lose your job or when you're no longer working in a big corporation is you lose your people, you lose your tribe. So unless you have other people around you that are like-minded, it's really easy to succumb to the conversations that tend to happen from friends and family, which is, what are you doing? Just retire. It's time to relax. And that message often doesn't resonate with people, and it makes them feel like their instincts aren't correct.
Many people are, you know, they're right up against it, you know, and they're really betting that they do have something to contribute, and almost everybody does, but it's, I guess it's the business you people are in, they're finding the slot for them. But I mean, where I was as a, without getting into why I was there and how nonsensical it all was, but you know, as a guest of the American people, I helped a lot of my fellow guests as best I could, and I'm in touch with many of them, and that really is a challenge where they have this stigma of their supposed misconduct. Whether they were actually guilty of anything is another thing, but some of them were and some weren't. But you really have to buck those people up. And when I was there, they had me give these sort of pep talks to guys who were leaving. They were going out, and I was staying, but I was to encourage them, you see. And that's a maximum challenge. And yet many of them are perfectly decent people who either were innocent in the first place or made a mistake and would never do it again.
Well, we'll talk about that. We got a lot more files to work on this subject, so we'll be back in a second. Stay with us. I love how that collage starts with all the life-affirming stuff. Brand new, 50. It's all smiley, and then it ends with the cut the crap, get a job. When I looked online, you know, for reinvention and work, there is hundreds of self-help books out there, which partly makes me think that the new reinvention is to be an author and write a self-help book. But one of the ones I thought, which was really funny, was Knock 'em Dead Job Interview Flashcards. There's 300 in here, and you can practice them all, shall we? Okay. Which of the following personal adornments are considered part of an acceptable look for an interview? A, tattoos, provided they're tasteful. B, short-sleeved shirts or blouses. C, men's earrings. Or D, wedding bands. Answers?
I would say all of them.
Wedding bands are acceptable. Always wear a long-sleeved shirt or blouse. It is an acceptable part of professional dress.
That wouldn't apply to either you, Denise, or to Greg.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Depend on the environment.
if you're working
and again,
for a
it
tattoo
depends,
parlor,
it depends where you're working.
It's, you know, it's what was said of Mrs. Obama, the right to bear arms, you know.
That's right. Here's a good one. Tracy, maybe you're being asked this a lot. What do you think of your current last boss, or how could he or she have done a better job?
I'd have to defer.
You'd have to defer. Okay.
Think a little bit about that.
Well, that's good because they say here, never criticize management. Do you hear that in the control room? That's good. People who complain about their employers are registered as troublemakers. So the question is the interviewer's way of finding out if you're going to cause trouble. You both liked and respected that manager and appreciated both the guidance and the encouragement to grow. That's pretty good advice in there. So let's just do a really quick round the table then. For Zoomers that may be out of work, looking to reinvent themselves or to get back into the workplace or maybe switch jobs, any last minute advice? Start with Marty.
First of all, to the employers out there, there's things that need to change there in terms of their mindset, even starting with the websites. Where the pictures are full of young people smiling and come work with us. They're not pictures of any of us around the table smiling and saying, come work with us. So it's about creating that equitable workplace. And for reinventing and all of that good stuff, again, it's about the networking, it's about making those contacts and being open-minded and really embracing this as this is a new adventure, this is a new chapter in my life, and I own it.
And go with the gusto. Yeah. Quick, David?
Whether you like it or not, it's branding, and the natural brand for any Zoomer, any older person is, I have more experience, I have better judgment, and I can make you money if you're my contractor. And that's
hired!
the story.
Right there.
There you go.
Lisa?
I think it's being really clear about your sweet spot and what you can contribute. So what do you need, and how do you know that that's how much you need? And what else do you need in addition to money? What do you love? What talents can you offer that you often discount because they come so naturally to you that you forget you have them? And where's the market?
To me, it all comes down to your passion. So you've got to find what your passion is and find out how to take advantage of that. So even when I was working in the corporate world, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so I had a plan for it. I was prepared. When I opened the Strength Box, I had a specific vision of how I was going to train people and how I would make it different from everybody else.
For me, being in the job seeker environment, just staying engaged at all different levels with all different people, that really was what propelled me to get excited again and really get involved.
You've got to torque yourself up. Everybody, absolutely everybody, has some value and has, there's a right spot for everyone. Work up a good pitch based on what David said. I'll make you money. No one wants this job more than I do. No one will work harder at it. And I know what I'm doing, and I'll really deliver for you.
You should also avoid those ads that say that we're looking for someone fresh and flexible and energetic, because I think that's code. We're going to be back with our elder fashionistas. Stay tuned.
I don't give a damn what anybody says about me, not at all. The only person I care who thinks well or not of me is my husband.
I think you dress more for yourself as you get older. And I think because by that time you know who you are.
Vision TV has a wonderful documentary coming up tonight after the show called The Fabulous Fashionistas. It's a 1-hour special on 6 women, their average age is 80 years old, who are redefining what it means to be aging with style. And Zoomer Magazine's Suzanne Boyd joined me to talk about it.
Stretch, stretch, stretch. I like wearing short skirts, and sometimes I think people must look at me and think, that poor old 87-year-old woman, who does she think she is? I don't give a toss. I don't give a damn what anybody says about me, not at all. The only person I care who thinks well or not of me is my husband.
Do you think she's typical? Is she dressing only for herself and her husband, or do women only dress for themselves? I don't think so.
I think you dress more for yourself as you get older. And I think because by that time you know who you are and you know what works and doesn't work. And the whole idea of age appropriateness has changed so much. The way there's no more fashion rules, there's no more age rules. I mean, right after Labor Day. I mean, and she really doesn't look like a poor old 87-year-old woman. And she has a husband who's 20 years younger than her. So I think her legs are just fine to be in a short skirt.
Exactly. And that attitude, too, I think will carry you through a lot of challenges physically.
And I think what's happening now with aging, it's the same things that's happened with fashion. There's no rules. There's no rules. I mean, in the old days, it used to be a daughter wanted to look like their mother, then mothers wanted to look like their daughters, and then everyone got confused about what is age appropriate. But now I think it's just how you feel and what best expresses your spirit.
The way I dress releases me from the tyranny of fashion. It's so easy to get dressed in the morning because I put on a black dress and then I choose one of these things. I don't have to worry, is it in style, is it not in style, is it too long, did I get too fat, too thin? They're all very, very easy to wear. I choose a jacket, I choose a piece of jewelry, I put on my faithful clogs, and I'm ready to go. I would like not to be oh, I'm going to say something really stupid now. I can't believe I'm going to say this. I don't want to be too over the top.
Oh, really?
I am over the top. But what I mean is I like to keep a certain amount of elegance.
And I think she manages it. She's over the top and she's elegant. Does that come with maturity? Elegance equals maturity for me somehow.
Yeah, but I think it also comes with character because she reminds me of these immortal words of William Blake, the word of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. She knows exactly who she is. And it's very practical. I mean, she's in the comfy shoes, and it's actually a fashion uniform. And a lot of stylish people have a uniform. There's simple elements that she breaks down every day, but it's interpreted through her personality and her character, which is this bird of paradise eccentricity. I can't say the word.
Eccentricity.
Thank you. and it's just what makes her special, but it's still very unique to who she is.
Let's look at Daphne. She's got a lot more formal training as a fashion model.
Well, I'm now 85, and I'm not sure that I'm really a supermodel, but people seem to call me that from time to time. But apparently I'm definitely the oldest model in England. The camera likes me. There's something about people's faces that the camera likes, and mine happens to be lucky.
Let's talk about age for a minute, just in terms of fashion, because, you know, typically, or my understanding anyway, is the fashion industry is focused on, you know, 14-year-old waifs, it seems. How big a business, or is it a growing business for older, more mature people?
Well, I think it happens in phases. There's one thing where ever so often fashion gets really enamored with something. So sometimes there'll be an older model revival.
Right.
And it's happened several times in the last 20 years where there's, let's bring the old models back. And so you'll see like a big group of supermodels from the 70s or the 80s now, or even the 90s, and that's a big thing. And fashion is always about newness and something new, and youth means new. And I think with the growing older demographic, they're more older people, but will they want to see themselves reflected in fashion magazines and in fashion campaigns because maybe they don't think it's aspirational, which is very, you know, people mightn't want to see themselves, and that's a controversial thing that fashion is still working through to this day.
Well, I think we should push it.
Yes,
as
I think
you are.
we should.
Yes.
We try.
Well, let's have a look, because I think our next lady, she's working in retail, and she's in her late 70s.
I said, Guy, I think I'm going to go and see if I can get something in a charity shop. So he thought for a moment. He said, Mother, there's nothing wrong with working in charity shops. He said, but I don't think it's for you. He said, you want something with a bit more life. So I said, I'm turned 70. I said, who'll want me? He said, somebody will want you. So I said, where will I go when I'm turned 70? So he thought for a couple of minutes, and I always laugh afterwards, because he said, Gap. I went to Gap, and they gave me the job immediately.
So she got a job in a very young industry.
Yeah, and I think it's because she looks of the moment. And I think what's great about this woman is she's obviously not trying to look younger than she is. I mean, there seems to be no sort of cosmetic intervention, we might say, and I mean, and the hairstyle isn't softening in any way. Her hair's gray. That's a very hard cut to pull off, but it's very fashion. So she was going into a fashion environment, and she looks of the moment, street fashion in any fashion capital. She would be on a blog somewhere. And so, and that's what you want to put out there, that sense of being current, not stuck in your zenith or feeling like you're on the way out. You want to be of the moment.
I bet she's really good. I bet when you come out of the dressing room with something on, she'd actually tell you the truth.
Yeah,
which we like.
That's a very straightforward haircut, and so are those shoes.
Exactly. What advice would you give for people who are going for a job interview? They finally got the resume, they're in, and then how do they best present themselves?
We had a great letter from a reader at Zoomer magazine where she had an open letter to all manufacturers, please make us clothes that fit. And we'll put it back online, because what she talked about also is you recognizing how your body has changed with time, and certain things, maybe the sleeves need to be higher or lower, darts need to be in different places. It's really a matter of fit and tailoring. I think really it's this sense of appropriateness, you know, that age-appropriate business attire. You know, it's kind of a bit more difficult, because when people older were in the workforce, it was very clear there were no casual Fridays. If it was a bank, you had on pantyhose, you know, and a jacket, and so it's a much looser. So you can really get lost in the thickets of that. So just understanding really the culture and the environment, And being aware of that, I think maybe go to the building, have a coffee nearby, see people coming and going, Google who you're having the interview with, see what they look like and how they're presented on the corporate website. And all these tools can really help give you the information so you look like you need to when you finally get there.
Yeah, and wear comfortable clothes too, I would say. If you're worried that you're holding your stomach in the whole time because you just popped a button, you're not going to be focusing on what you need to say.
Yeah, but I might disagree with that because a tight jacket and could really make you
stand up straight?
Yeah, it helps. Yeah.
Okay, then. There you
not
go.
Not tight-fitted.
I've been corrected.
I think you're right. It needs to fit and not be uncomfortable, but strict tailoring gives a really nice shape.
Absolutely.
We're thrilled, of course, to have a beautiful young married couple. The older generations are a bit boring for most people.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, look at the
Well,
tremendous
look at us.
interest
I mean, look at us.
You, anyway.
You've been hanging out with the royals in London. It looks like a very chummy conversation with Princess Michael. How did you meet her?
Well, when I was a newspaper chairman in London, you met virtually every prominent person, and we were neighbors, and we had some mutual friends also. She's from Germany, and she's interested in people who come from another place and have a position in London, because she, sometimes she's been, I think, unfairly criticized for mannerisms that are thought to be slightly un-English.
Well, it's a very friendly conversation here. Let's have a look.
My guest today is Her Royal Highness Princess Michael of Kent, who, if I may say so, is a good friend and a very loyal friend. We've known each other some years now.
Many years.
And she is not only a princess, but a historian, very accomplished historian, about to produce the first book in a trilogy in the 15th century entitled The Queen of Four Kingdoms.
That's right, The Queen of Four Kingdoms, and it's my first novel.
But it's a historically, factually based novel.
Totally.
Yeah. And you've had a number of other careers. You were an interior decorator at the time you joined the royal family.
I was an interior designer. I came to England to learn that because you couldn't in Austria. So I thought if I study something I can't study in Austria, then I have a good excuse to come. And I was an apprenticed interior designer for a number of years till I had my own company. And then I was very successful because being a good Hun, I suppose, I was always on time, which not a lot of interior designers are. My jobs were ready on time and within the estimate. And sometimes I gave refunds, which just blew the client's mind.
And when you became a member of the royal family, that was a problem, was it?
Well, I didn't think it would be. Nobody said it would be. And my husband was in the army then, and I thought I would continue because my husband didn't have a civil list. He was a second son. And when I came back, it was made apparent to me that it wasn't appropriate for a royal princess to be in trade, buying and selling, And so I was rather dismayed by that because I said, well, who's going to compensate me for my loss of income? Well, that was my problem, I was informed.
What about the controversy, if that's the right word for it, over you being a Roman Catholic?
Yes, well, it was much more difficult 35 years ago. I think times have changed a lot. It wasn't popular in some sections of the family at all. The young don't care, you know. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of, I find, there's not a lot of spiritual interest among the young today. But when I was newly married, it was still a problem, but it's a historical problem.
Most religiosity in this country is either Roman Catholic or Muslim now.
Now, yes. But of course the law under which I fell of 1702, the law of succession that no member of the royal family may marry a Roman Catholic, is still the law. I remember when I was getting married, there wasn't time for the British public, really, to look into anything of my background except my Catholicism, because that's all for 1 month that the newspapers dwelt on. And the fact that I descended from Dracula. But I don't. My husband is a direct descendant of Dracula. I descend from Dracula's half-brother, Drac the monk, for your information.
Very virtuous member of the family.
And because Queen Mary, through Queen Mary, he descends from Dracul, the Drac, which means the chief, All right, he impaled lots of people, but lots of people impaled people at that time. He just probably was worse than most.
Now, we have all suffered at the hands of the London media at times, but they're not bothering you now, are they?
I think I'm too old to be interesting now.
Well, you underestimate yourself. But
No, but I mean, I think that the young are much more interesting
the
to
younger
the
royals.
media.
Yeah, well, that could be. Well, speaking of that, I mean, obviously you would not be indiscreet, and I wouldn't encourage you to be anyway, but for the benefit of Canadian viewers, could you give us any recollections of, for example, Princess Diana? She lived right near here.
She was my next-door neighbour, and I must say I was very, very fond of her, very attached to her. She had an enormous amount of goodness in her, and like probably many people of little education who find themselves in, I mean, I think of pop stars or film stars who are suddenly lauded by the whole world. It's very difficult if you haven't had a mother bring you up who was quite stern and strict. She didn't have a mother bring her up, and she didn't have much education. So it's much harder to cope with eulogy, I'm guessing now, because I had a very strict mother, and also I didn't have anything like her eulogy. And I think that Diana was wonderful with the people. She had this famous common touch. She was marvelous with the people. But then to be on your own and to have not really a terrific support group, if you like.
That office of hers were
I'm sorry?
her office were jolly hockey stick Sloane Rangers. I mean,
Yes, but they weren't her
amateurs.
class ever. I mean, you know, they were very nice and lovely girls,
very
but
nice,
they weren't in her position. How could they be in her position? And she didn't sort of have. She had her two sisters, but they were on, you know, sort of doing their thing. But she was the youngest, and she was on her own. And her mother went to Australia when she was 10 years old or something. And that's tough. I think that's tough.
Yeah, no,
And Sarah Ferguson had the same thing. I mean, her mother went off to Buenos Aires or something when she was very young. So, I mean, I think that to have had a strong mother is the thing.
Would you comment on the Cambridges?
I'm sorry?
The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge,
Certainly
would you
not.
comment
What
on?
do you think you're doing, asking me about? No, certainly not. Don't comment on members of the royal family. Certainly not. Diana's dead. History's dead. You know, history's talking about dead people.
But you can
I cannot.
make a completely benign comment. I wouldn't expect any other.
Well, of course, but I mean, we're thrilled, of course, to have a beautiful young married couple with a baby just a month older than my first grandchild. And let's hope there are more marriages soon, you know, because I think to have young generation is terribly good for the people. You know, people love to see happy young people. I think, you know, the older generations are a bit boring for most people. You know?
Well, I don't know about that. You know, I mean, look at the
Well,
tremendous
look at us.
interest.
I mean, look at us.
You anyway. But, the Queen Mother had a huge following right to the end.
Huge following, yes.
Well, but they, I mean, look, I don't know them at all, but are they as they appear, just an attractive young couple?
They're very attractive. I mean, look at the photographs, very attractive. Don't you talk to me about members of the royal family. You know perfectly well I'm not going to talk about the royal family.
Well, I'm certainly not, as I
We're going
said,
to talk about my
seeking
book
anything
now.
indiscreet. That's what
We're
we're
talking
getting
about my
to,
book
yes, that's what we're getting to. Very well then, let's take the leap from the Cambridges to Yolande. Will you tell us about your book?
She was called Yolande d'Aragon, Yolande of Aragon, before Aragon joined with Castile to make what we know today as Spain, because although she's very self-effacing and doesn't take credit for anything, she's actually responsible for bringing the 100 Years' War to an end. She's responsible for for Joan of Arc's existence.
Now, this is an immense undertaking then.
Well, it's been 7 years. I started wanting, but
you're presenting over a century of European history.
More or less, not quite. I'm a bit short in the beginning, a bit short at the end.
Do you have a publisher in Canada?
I don't. Please, may I have one?
Yeah,
It's a thrilling book.
I think we could manage that.
Lots of violence and
no,
lots of
I know
love.
your books. No, your books are splendid.
Books are splendid.
I'm an avid reader.
You love all my books.
Of course I do. Thank you so much
Thank
for being
you
with us.
so much. It was a great pleasure.
Always is. On balance, he was one of Israel's and the region's greatest leaders, and Israelis are right to honor him. The death of Ariel Sharon at age 85 has been the occasion for predictable polls of reaction, despite his having spent the last 8 years in a coma, which with most people might have cooled out the forces of cant and emotionalism that surround many political leaders, especially in the Middle East. Sharon is particularly disliked by Palestinians because he was found negligent in the admission of armed Christian militants into the Sabra district and the Shatila camp, where around 2,000 Muslim, Lebanese, and Palestinian refugees were murdered. Sharon vigorously defended himself, but was never entirely cleared. On the other side, as a general, he resurrected Israel's forces with a brilliant envelopment of an Egyptian army in the Yom Kippur War of 1973, was a very successful minister for the settlement and housing of a tremendous influx of immigrants from Russia, won the Second Intifada, which Arafat outrageously unleashed after failing to win the outright abandonment of Israel's status as a Jewish homeland, and made the anti-Semitic and pitifully gullible world media ridiculous as they screamed about the Jenin massacre, which did not, in fact, occur. He stopped the suicide bombings by killing the Hamas terrorist leaders after each incident, exposing their own lack of enthusiasm to die, and by building the defensive fence in the West Bank. And Sharon founded a new political party to pursue an ambitious peace program that pulled Israel entirely out of Gaza. On balance, he was one of Israel's and the region's greatest leaders, and Israelis are right to honor him.
Next week on the show, the media, how it's changing, how we use it, how we lose it. This is going to be one you're not going to want to miss. So, Conrad, what do you think? Are we going to hell in a handbasket in traditional media?
No, I think, each year there's some new step out, and so the traditional media is still there. It may be shrinking in share, but people are clinging tenaciously to it. This constant change is frightening and inconvenient.
Right.
I'm sticking them out, you see.
Well, they did say when TV was invented that radio would be over, and
Sure.
radio is still alive
and
and
the
well.
newspaper was supposed to have died when films came out.
There you go. Still alive and well. Although there are a few things to consider. We're going to see you next week. Let's zoom out.